Welcome to the Career Creator Podcast, where we highlight the stories of everyday women moving through fear to make changes in their life and career. Thanks for being here. I'm your host, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Career Creator Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel, and this week we are going to do something similar that we did last week. So instead of me hosting, my friend Kindra is back again, and we're going to talk about why I started the podcast. So this is a question that a few people have asked and wanted to know. So I thought it would be great to just record a mini short episode just to give the background on how this came to be. So thanks for being with us again, Kindra.
Thank you for having me. And this is a question, Rachel, that I have been dying to know. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too.
So now you have a podcast, and I think it's absolutely cool that you're venturing into this space. But how did this come to be?
Yeah, so I had this idea 5 years ago. I remember I went to a cupcake shop. This was when I was in grad school, and the woman was so happy. I've never seen someone that happy at work. So I asked her, how did you start this cupcake shop? And she told me she had gotten laid off from work, and her husband was like, why don't you just go after your dream? And she did. And it was, a few years later, and she was loving it. And I was just really inspired by her story. And then I had heard other people's stories of how they've changed careers or how they had a low moment in their career, but they always came back from it. So I wanted to create a space to share some of those stories and to highlight the fact that we all deal with some of the challenges in our career, and we're just trying to figure it out.
So knowing that you've never done a podcast before, how did you even know where to begin? Like, what are the steps? Like, tell us about that process, because I'm actually very intrigued by this.
Yeah. So I never had a podcast before. This is all new to me. Thankfully, I have been a guest on some podcasts, so I was familiar with kind of how the recording part happens a little bit on the back end. And at one point, I won a contest and I got to be a guest host on a podcast for one episode.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was a fun experience. And I just like this medium. So the process of starting one, the first thing I did, I called my friend who I was a guest on her podcast a few years ago. I called her and I'm like, can you just spend 20 minutes telling me everything you know about starting a podcast? And she walked me through like tools she used, what they learned. She had a co-host, so she told me what they learned. And I also went to some of my favorite podcast websites, and some of the hosts of those podcasts sell materials that teach people how to start a podcast. So I bought one or two of those guides on how to start a podcast, and I just went through the checklist on what to do, what to download, and I did a bunch of Google searches.
Awesome. So you said you had this idea about 5 years ago, right? So between 5 years ago and now, is this something that you just kind of had on your someday maybe, or were you actively working towards this over the course of the 5 years?
Yeah. So this is what I call one of my dreams on a shelf. Like, I have a dream. I think I'm still going to use it, but just not now. And when I first had the idea, I actually thought it was going to be a blog. So I did reach out to people at that time and talk to them about their career stories, but it was one or two friends. I didn't really run with the idea and I let it go. But coming out of, the last few years and everything we've been through, I felt like this year I really was craving a creative outlet. And the idea for the podcast came up again, and I don't remember why or how, but it was something I just couldn't stop thinking about. So I said, why not try it right now? And I had signed up for a retreat that was for writers, but they mentioned podcasters. And I said, well, we're going to talk about that there. The host of the retreat is a podcaster. I said, maybe that's a sign that this is something I need to run with. So I called my friend. I talked to a few people and said, hey, I think I'm going to do this. And they were like, okay, if you record the intro, I'll listen to it, give you some feedback. And it was something that for this entire year, I've kind of just been slowly working on.
And for those of you who may not have listened to the previous episode, as we talked about Rachel's career journey, one of the things that I noticed, or themes that I called out, and here we go again, is networking. Rachel is the queen of networking and utilizing her resources to ask questions. And I think that is a great skill to have. So the name of the podcast is called Career Creator. How did you come up with the name, the theme? Did you already know you wanted to do this when you created a podcast? Tell us about how you got to this title and the topic.
Yeah. So for my day job, I lead all of our kind of growth and development career frameworks at my company, and I do all of our leadership development. So this is the thing I'm thinking about a lot. Like, how are people growing and learning? And what do they need? So this is the space that I love. I'm always reading about it in my free time. But the thing is, I really care about people's career, not because I think our careers are our most important thing in life, but I care about careers because I do think they can empower a lot of our lives and they can also get in the way. And I know for me personally, I've had a career journey that is not a straight line. And there are times where I felt like my career was keeping me from having a great life. And I just wanted to create a space where we could talk about things that intersect both career and life. But I wanted to take the career standpoint because I think there's a lot of power there.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you are enjoying your career and it's something that feels like it energizes you, you get value there, it just makes your life better because most of us have to work. We need to make money. So if we
Mm-hmm.
have to be somewhere, we shouldn't feel miserable for 8 hours of the day. So I wanted it to be career focused because I care so much about lives. And I just think career is something that most of us have in common. And I wanted a name that was creative. I was thinking of the word like build, the idea of like building something from scratch. And so I just was playing around with like different words around like building, and create came to mind. I'm like, oh, creating. And
Mm-hmm.
so basically I picked this name because all the other names, the website was taken.
No, but
That is the
no,
truth of choosing a name.
I get that. That is very real. But I really like this specifically for you because, as we talked about in the previous episode, I talked about some of the themes that we've learned. But another thing that I've just dawned on me as I'm listening to you speak is that you truly have created your career. You truly have created your own path. And so for me, that creator really stands out and it gives it a different meaning. So I really
Yeah.
like that, Rachel.
Thank you. Yeah. And I wanted people to see that like creating a career, you hear a lot of the stories and it's like, oh, here's my career. I love it. But you don't hear what it took to get there. So I also wanted to highlight people go through a lot in between. There's usually a lot of tears involved. There's a lot of doubt. There's some sleepless nights. There's a lot of not knowing if you're making the right decision. So I also wanted to highlight the moments in between.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If there's one thing that you want your listeners to take away from this podcast, what is it?
That's a great question. I would say I want people to feel less alone in their career journey. I want
Mm-hmm,
people to see whether you love your career, you hate your career, if you feel lost, if you have a great plan, wherever you're at in your journey, I just want people to know there's someone out there who's dealing with that too. There's someone out there who has the same questions.
mm-hmm.
And I want people to feel like they're seen and valued and supported in at least a very small way by listening to this podcast.
That's amazing. I'm so excited for you, Rachel. Congratulations on your podcast. And I can't wait to see what comes of this and listen to all your future episodes.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being host again. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about why this podcast was created. Have a good day. Thanks for listening to the Career Creator Podcast. If you want to sign up for our email newsletter or keep in touch, please visit our website, www.thecareercreatorpodcast.com, also linked in the show notes. I appreciate you joining us, and always remember, your next move doesn't have to be your last move.